At number 10, Charles Manson. The gold standard for Manson media misadventures has to be that time Geraldo Rivera sat down with the man himself back in 1988. Things start off innocent enough, with Manson stating his desire to end 50 million people and proclaiming a dictator was only trying to bring order to the world.
You want to kill 50 million people?
Well, that's just a drop in the bucket to what's really coming.
But it's not long before Chucky Boy starts getting fairly belligerent, at one point asking the interviewer how he would like it if he hopped over there and beat the dog poo out of him. After that, Manson goes on a long tirade about how much he hates Susan Atkins, his admiration for Bing Crosby, his personal stabbing technique, he claims he cuts a little but has never stuck it in, why a smoky substance should be legal, and how his exploits in the 60s came this close to resurrecting Jesus. And for that grand finale, he claims Ronald Reagan personally planted evidence on him and tells Geraldo he likes his boots. I'd be terrified if I were him. At number 9, Jeffrey Dahmer. In this interview, Dahmer shows just how crazy he is. In an interview with Inside Edition, which first appeared in 1993, Dahmer discusses his modus operandi, or method of operation, in an extremely calm way. He describes how he got a surge of energy whenever he experienced sawing off limbs in his grandmother's basement, and says it was nearly euphoric. He tells the interviewer that he took photos of the deceased to preserve their physical beauty. He then explains how he started having fantasies about executing people when he was very young, then explains lethargically how a human heart tastes. Oh, and he brought a human head to work one day, just because he could. At number 8, Ted Bundy. Just hours before Ted Bundy was executed in 1989, he sat down for a final interview with Focus on the family founder James Dobson. Bundy, who confessed to ending the lives of 30 women, but his total removal count may exceed 100 victims, used the TV time to explain away his gruesome misdeeds on, what else, watching too much adult films. Instead of taking responsibility for his own actions, Bundy played Dobson, considered by many to be the father of modern-day conservative evangelical movement, like a fiddle, claiming the sinister X-rated entertainment literally possessed him and drove him to an insane urge to end lives. Number 7, Richard Ramirez. In the mid-1980s, Richard Ramirez terrorized Southern California with a string of gruesome home invasion executions. After ending 13 people, the so-called Night Stalker was sentenced to execution, which in his case came in the form of succumbing to a terminal illness while waiting on the to execute list in 2013. In a rare interview with Inside Edition, Ramirez smiles like a maniac when the interviewer asks him why he felt the need to break into people's houses and beat the tenants to their demise with tire irons, aloofly stating, "No comment, I cannot answer at this time." At number 6, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy sat down with reporter Walter Jacobson for an extremely rare interview. His intent? Well, he wanted to let the world know that he was framed. In the feeble attempt to garner himself a new trial before his date with the lethal injection needle, Gacy proceeded to spit out one lie after the other, stating, among other brass-balled mistruths, that he had undergone 5 hours of truth serum assisted lie detector tests and he didn't believe in physically punishing disobedient children, proving himself to be the absolute least qualified person in human history to ever provide legal defense. Gacy at one point slips up during the interview, telling the interviewee that one of his victims was, and I quote, "not one that I executed." Alas, you can't slight Gacy's quick wit. At number 5, Stephen McDaniel. Compared to the rest of the heavy hitters on this list, Stephen McDaniel is definitely a lightweight. Still, he's worthy of inclusion on the list because, unlike everyone else on this countdown, he had the honor of being interviewed live by a television news crew before he was convicted of anything, or even arrested for that matter. Alas, it was during that interview that McDaniel found out that police had discovered the remains for his neighbor, which he executed, and you can practically pinpoint the moment of the video in which his mask of sanity shatters into a million billion pieces. Shortly after the interview aired, McDaniel confessed to executing his neighbor. Following a plea bargain, he was sentenced to life in prison for his grisly doings. At number 4, Ed Kemper. Kemper sent at least 10 individuals to their graves, including his mother and both paternal grandparents, and earned the nickname the Co-Ed Butcher due to his predilection for targeting female college students in California. Believed to have an IQ in the genius range, you can certainly tease out the distressing coherence from the confirmed cannibal in this 1991 interview, in which he lays out precisely how and why he turned to executing strangers as a recreational activity, describing how he used to drive around picking up hitchhikers as practice for disarming soon-to-be victims. Terrifying. Number 3, Gary Ridgeway. The name Gary Ridgeway may not ring a bell at first. That's primarily because he's better known as the Green River Executioner, who between 1982 and 1998 removed at least 4 dozen women in the Pacific Northwest, although he confessed to 70 and may be responsible for 90 plus. In this undated interview, presumably it happened somewhere between his arrest in 2001 and his record-breaking 49 counts multiple executions conviction in 2003, Ridgeway spent a majority of his time talking about how mean and spiteful his mother was, was, which he said convinced him into stabbing his schoolmates and torturing small animals in his youth. At number 2, Otis Tool. Colloquially known as the Jacksonville Cannibal, Otis Tool is probably best known for two things. First, his chummy relationship with fellow serial executioner Henry Lee Lucas, and being officially named as the man who abducted, removed, and decapitated the son of America's Most Wanted host, John Walsh. While Tool bragged to officials about ending the lives of scores of victims, he was only charged with 2 slangs, with another 4 executions added to his mega super duper life sentence in 1991. In this interview from 1993, the man who fancied himself some arson alongside his grave robbing begins by talking about his pyromaniac desire to watch an entire city burn.
A power movie.
And finally, at number 1, Eileen Warnos. Eileen Warnos is the infamous Florida street worker who over the course of 2 years shot and executed 7 men. In this interview recorded just hours before she received the lethal injection in 2002, Warnos wastes no time at all as she starts claiming that she's been subject to supersonic weaponry torture since the late 1990s. Then she says the prison was intentionally giving her food poisoning and helicopters were chasing her before she was even arrested for her string of executions. Then she says she can't wait to pass away because she'll be beamed up Star Trek style to explore the cosmos, and that she feels sorry for us because we're all going to get nuked by a comet in 2019. Clearly, she was wrong. At number 10, Kevin Strickland. April 25th, 1978. Kansas City, Missouri. A group of 4 friends were hanging out in one of their houses when all of a sudden, crash! A group of assailants begin ransacking the house. All of the friends were tied up and shot, resulting in the passing of 3 of them. One woman, Cynthia Douglas, was shot in her leg and pretended to be gone from this world until the assailants left. Then, she crawled out of the house. Strickland was at home, watching television. 2 suspects, Kilm Adkins and Vincent Bell, were later arrested. Bell was a childhood friend of Strickland's and lived at a house nearby. Police found a fingerprint belonging to Strickland on Bell's car. Strickland says that this was because he had driven the car before, but the last time he had seen Adkins and Bell was at 5 or 6 p.m. on the night of the executions. Later, when police arrested Strickland, Douglas picked him out of a police lineup. Douglas later said that she was pressured into naming him as one of the perpetrators by detectives on the case, and until her passing in 2015, attempted to have her testimony recanted. In 2009, she emailed the Midwest Innocence Project, saying, "I'm seeking info on how to help someone that was wrongfully accused. I was the only eyewitness and things were not clear back then, but now I know more and would like to help this person if I can." Douglas said police told her, "Just pick Strickland out of the lineup and we'll be done. It will all go away. You can go on and you don't have to worry about these guys no more." Atkins and Bell confessed to the executions, but said Strickland was not a participant. Strickland was in prison for 42 years. He was 18 years old when arrested and 60 when he was exonerated. At number 9, the Beatrice 6. A dark February 5th night in 1985, time unknown. A 68-year-old woman was found executed in her apartment in Beatrice, Nebraska. The Beatrice Police Department opened an investigation, but no arrests were made. There were possible suspects, but blood tests failed to link them to the crime. Among those eliminated was Bruce Allen Smith, who was located in Oklahoma City. There, Oklahoma City Police Laboratory technician Joyce Gilchrist, later fired for her involvement in years of forensic fraud, tested Smith's biological sample and eliminated him as a suspect. Not long after, Burdett Searcy, a former investigator for the Beatrice Police Department who was working as a farmer, began his own independent investigation. He interviewed a number of formal confidential informants who assisted him in identifying several people who frequented the area of Wilson's apartment: Joseph White, Thomas Winslow, Ada Joanne Taylor, Cliff Sheldon, Mark Goodson, Beth Johnson, Deborah Sheldon, and Charlotte Bishop. 6 individuals, 4 from the list, gave their own version of how it went down, one of them only being able to vaguely remember anything, saying he has no memory of the crime but has seen it in a dream. White was sentenced to life in prison. Winslow was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Taylor was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Sheldon received 10-year prison terms. These 4, along with 2 others, were sent to prison, but eventually, after serving 18 years as a group, they were all exonerated. At number 8, Valentino Dixon. At about 1 a.m. on August 10th, 1991, nearly 100 people were hanging out at the intersection of East Delavan and Bailey Avenues near Louis' Texas Red Hots in Buffalo, New York, when a fistfight broke out. 2 brothers, 17-year-old Toriano Jackson and 20-year-old Aaron Jackson, were atop 19-year-old Mario Jarman when someone yelled, "Watch out, he's got a gun!" As people scattered, more than 24 gunshots rang out. When the shooting stopped and people began to return to the intersection, Toriano Jackson was deceased. Aaron Jackson and Jarman were wounded. A bystander, 17-year-old John Sullivan, suffered a graze wound on his leg. police interviewed Mario Jarman at the hospital. He said Toriano Jackson shot him. Two other witnesses, including Dixon's half-brother, Leonard Brown, said the gunman was 19-year-old Lamar Scott. 3 days later, a Buffalo television station reported that someone else had confessed on videotape to being the gunman. The station did not identify him, but police quickly learned that the man was Scott. At the time, police believed that Dixon was a substance seller and that Scott worked as his bodyguard. Detectives interviewed Scott, who had said he had shot the Jackson brothers after they began shooting at his friend Jarman. Scott offered to take a polygraph test. That offer was rejected, and police discounted Scott's confession. Witnesses described the gunman as 6 feet tall and more than 170 pounds. Some said the gunman was heavy-set. Scott was just over 6 feet tall and about 200 pounds. Dixon was 5 feet 7 inches tall and about 130 pounds. On June 12, 1992, the jury convicted Dixon of second-degree execution, attempted execution, harm, and criminal possession of a weapon. He was sentenced to 38 1/3 years to life in prison. Dixon was released from prison 21 years later after his incarceration in 1991. At number 7, we have Walter McMillian. In 1986, an 18-year-old white woman by the name of Rhonda Morrison was executed in downtown Monroeville, Alabama, and police couldn't solve the crime. After 6 months with no leads or suspects, they turned their attention to McMillian, who was an unlikely suspect with no prior criminal history. A white man who was accused of crimes in another country was pressured by police to make false statements about McMillian, accusing him of taking the life of Miss Morrison. Walter was arrested by Monroe County Sheriff Tom Tate, who arranged for Walter to be placed on deceased row before the trial when he wasn't even convicted of any crimes. McMillian spent a horrifying 15 months on Alabama's deceased row before his trial. Walter McMillian was 11 miles away from the scene of the crime when it occurred, which dozens of black people testified, but the nearly all-white jury sentenced him to life in prison without parole. The judge overrode the sentencing and actually sentenced him to execution by electric chair. McMillian spent 6 more years on deceased row before he was released in March of 1993, making him among the first exonerees from deceased row. At number 6, the Baltimore Three. In the hallway of his Baltimore Middle School one afternoon in November 1983, DeWitt Duckett, 14, was shot and executed for his Georgetown University jacket. The attack was shocking, the first execution in a Baltimore City school, and the pressure to solve the case was intense. Early on Thanksgiving Day that year, police arrested 3 teenagers who were eventually convicted of execution and sentenced to life in prison. On Monday, 36 years after they were incarcerated, Baltimore Circuit Court Judge Charles J. Peters declared them innocent. On behalf of the criminal justice system, and I'm sure this means very little to you, I'm going to apologize, Peters told them. We're adjourned. The packed courtroom erupted in applause and family members began crying and hugging. At number 5, Dante Sharp. At about 9:15 p.m. on February 11th, 1994, 33-year-old George Radcliffe was found shot to execution in his Mazda pickup truck near the intersection of Shepherd and West 6th Streets in Greenville, North Carolina. The neighborhood was predominantly African American with a reputation for substance activity. Radcliffe was white, and police believed the shooting was likely related to a substance transaction gone bad. There was no forensic evidence tying Sharp to the crime scene. The police department's fingerprint technician had waited at least 3 days to process Radcliffe's truck, and because of that delay, only 2 prints suitable for comparison were found. The technician reported that neither Sharp nor Radcliffe was the source of either of those prints. Sharp was 44 years old when he was released. During the 24 years he was in prison, he had rejected several plea offers that would have given him a lesser sentence. He told the Associated Press, "My mama always told me that if you didn't do something, don't own up to it. Don't say you did." He said his faith provided the positivity to help me when I was around all that negativity. On November 12, 2021, Governor Roy Cooper granted Sharp a pardon of innocence, making him eligible to receive state compensation for his wrongful conviction. Number 4, Reginald Hayes. Hayes had spent nearly half of his life in prison for an execution he did not commit by the time he was freed from custody in 1998. Clark County prosecutors have never accused Hayes, born Reginald Mason, of any involvement in the 1985 execution that landed him in prison for 13 years, 3 months, and 11 days. Instead, they argued that the 14-year-old middle school student with no criminal record was guilty under Nevada's felony execution law because he was present at the time of the victim's kidnapping, which led to the slaying. It was a tragedy that he was even convicted, let alone in prison for all these years. Then, Las Vegas Police Under-Sheriff Richard Wingate wrote in a letter of support to the judge who ultimately granted Hayes freedom after years of appeals. A year after his release, the State Board of Pardons unanimously pardoned Hayes based on his innocence, but more than 2 decades would pass before the Las Vegas man was granted the highest form of criminal record expungement, a certificate of innocence awarded by the state along with $975,000 in compensation. Number 3, a teen from Toronto. The family of a black teenager from Toronto is looking for answers from Peel Regional Police after officers mistakenly arrested the 17-year-old while on the hunt for an execution suspect near Don Mills Road and Finch Avenue. Global News is not identifying the victim in the incident under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It's horrible. No kid should have to go through this, said the teen's godfather, David Bosveld. It's a completely gut-punching feeling. This is a case of racial profiling, and this is a case of shoddy police work. Bosveld said officers in unmarked vehicles from Peel Regional Police and Toronto Police Services boxed in the teen's vehicle, smashed at least one window, fired flash bombs into the car, and then dragged the youth out of the car before handcuffing him. The teenager's family has now started a GoFundMe page to try and raise money to hire counsel in hopes of taking legal action against police. Number 2. David Milgard. In 1969, the Winnipeg man was 16 years old and passing through Saskatchewan with friends when Saskatoon nurse Gail Miller's body was found in a snowbank. A year after Miller was executed, Milgard was convicted of her execution and incarcerated from the ages of 16 to 39. Lawyers have accused police of having the worst kind of tunnel vision. During the investigation of the case, his mother Joyce, who passed away in 2020, never doubted her son's innocence, and together they spent more than 20 years fighting to prove his innocence. Milgard believed he would have been left to rot in prison and always credited her for helping secure his freedom. He was released from prison in 1992, but it took several more years before he was exonerated. In 1997, the emergence of new DNA evidence linked notorious criminal Larry Fisher to the execution. Fisher was convicted of the crime 8 years later and sentenced to life in prison. He passed away in 2015 at the age of 65. Milgard received a multi-million-dollar compensation package from the federal government in 1999. At number 1, Anthony Harris. Harris, who was convicted of executing his neighbor in 1999 at the age of 13, but had that conviction overturned in appeal, was a kind, hard-working student who could never be involved in an execution. Harris's 6th grade teacher told ABC News. Jenny Arbogast, for the first time since Harris's ordeal. She said she has feelings of regret over her community's response to her former student's arrest and wrongful conviction. Devon's body was found in a wooded area behind her home in New Philadelphia, Ohio in 1998, and the police arrested and charged Harris with her execution. In 2000, an appeals court ruled that Harris's taped confession, which was the key piece of evidence used to prosecute him, was coerced, and he was released from custody. I was picturing my student sitting in that conference or standing at my desk doing his best to answer the questions the way he would think I wanted him to answer them. She's at number 10, Aaron Schmidt. On January 31st, 2011, Aaron shot and ended his neighbor, Alana Callahan. The teen initially claimed to have seen an intruder on her family's property, but later told investigators that he accidentally fired a gun in the Callahan's dining room. I didn't know the gun was loaded, Aaron said, through tears during a police interrogation. However, Superior Court Judge Michael Annis, who sentenced the boy to life in prison without parole plus 5 years, said he believes Aaron planned the execution. He was emotionless, remorseless during his interviews. Through the entire course of the trial, the judge stated in 2012, "No remorse, no I'm sorry, no nothing." Alana's sister, Amanda, and brother Chase discovered her body in some nearby woods after it was dragged out of the house by Aaron. Number 9, Carol Cole. At age 8, he retaliated against one of his classmates, a boy of the same age named Dwayne, by drowning him in a lake in Richmond, California. The execution was regarded as an accident by authorities until Cole confessed to it many years later in an autobiography he wrote in prison. During a press interview, Cole said of this event, "I was primed. I had made the mental commitment I was going to get even with my mother, and things just built up and became an obsession." As a teen, Cole committed several petty crimes and was frequently arrested for drunkenness and minor thefts. After high school, he joined the US Army, but was given a bad conduct charge in 1958 for stealing pistols. In 1960, Cole attacked 2 couples parked in cars on a lover's lane. Soon afterwards, he called the police in Richmond, California, where he was living, and told them that he was plagued by violent fantasies involving strangling women. On April 9, 1981, Cole was convicted of 3 slaughters. He was sentenced to life at the Huntsville prison. In 1984, Cole's mother passed away and his attitude was reported to have changed. He agreed to face further slaughter charges filed in Nevada, even though it could possibly mean the execution penalty. Number 8, Anton Wood. Anton Wood, who was 10 years old at the time, was showing a wealthy businessman a very good hunting ground, as the businessman wished to go hunting. Anton noticed the man's gold watch and his gun enviously. He was jealous. While the man was checking and inspecting the grounds and the surrounding area, Anton Wood snuck up behind the man and shot him. This ended him immediately. Anton was sent to prison, where he said that he'd remove anyone to get what he wanted, which is a known logic path that psychopaths commonly use. While in prison, he received tutoring and completed a college-level mathematics in just a year, leading the tutor to believe he was a genius. Number 7, Brooksy. Locked up in the Specialist Carlford unit near Woodbridge in Suffolk, Brooksy was locked up for a brutal execution. After 5 months incarcerated in his life sentence, Brooksy explained why he was thrown in the jail. He told the Observer that after his brother was assaulted and only 2 of the 4 individuals who did it were convicted, Brooksy and some of his family members went to the home of the other 2 and beat on them senselessly. One of the individuals passed away, which led Brooksy to a life sentence. The sentence don't really bother me, because I'm still really young and I've got my life to live, Brooksy said about his sentencing. If the small inmate has good behavior and is not threatening at all during his incarceration, the earliest he could be released is sometime before he turns 30, 15 years from when he was locked up at 15. Even if he gets released, if he were to do anything suspicious or criminal, he'd get sent right back to the prison to serve the rest of his sentence. The Carlford unit is known for having the most hardened criminals, aging from only 14 to 18 years old. Number 6, Cayetano Santos Gadino. Starting in childhood, Cayetano executed cats and birds and enjoyed playing with fire. His violent behavior and lack of interest in education caused him to move from school to school to school. In 1904, when he was 7 years old, Cayetano beat someone younger than him and threw him into a ditch. A nearby official saw this and led the children to the police station, where their mothers picked them up a few hours later. The next year, 1905, Cayetano beat another person in his neighborhood with a stone. A police officer intervened, but Cayetano was released from jail due to his young age. In 1906, Cayetano ended the life of Maria Rosa Fase. It was his first execution, but it went unnoticed and would only be discovered years later when he confessed to the police himself. He said that in 1906 he took a girl to the wasteland in Rio de Janeiro Street where he attempted to strangle her. Then he buried her alive in a ditch, which he covered with cans. The authorities, upon learning of this crime, moved to the site but found that a 2-story house had been built there. However, a missing persons complaint dated the 29th of March 1906 of a 3-year-old girl named Maria Rosa Fase was filed at the 10th police station. The missing girl was never found. When he was 10, not knowing what to do, his father reported him to the police, resulting in a 2-month jail term for him, but he quickly got out. At number 5, James Arsen. Arsen was the youngest person sentenced to execution who was subsequently executed for the crime. In the United States, Arsen, a Cherokee, was hanged by the US federal government in Fort Smith, Arkansas for his alleged role in a robbery and execution committed 13 years earlier, when he was 10 years old. Arsen and a Cherokee man named William Parchmeal noticed William Fagel, a Swedish national, making a purchase in a store. They followed Fagel when he left, heading for Fort Gibson, and caught up with him about 2 miles outside of the fort. With robbery as a motive, one of the two shot Fagel 6 times before crushing his skull with a rock. Arsen and Peachmeal then divested Fagel's corpse of his boots and money, totaling only 25 cents. Arsen was then arrested and tried for the robbery and slaughter of Fagel, but escaped and eluded capture until he was apprehended and executed at the age of 23. He and Peachmeal were ultimately caught by Deputy Marshal Andrews, after the case had lain cold for more than 10 years. Primary documents confirm that after he was captured, James Arsen claimed to have been a child in 1872 when the crime was committed. He did not revise that statement when it became clear that the status would not help him in sentencing. Number 4, Mary Bell. Mary Flora Bell is an English woman who, as a juvenile, slaughtered 2 boys in Scotswood, an inner suburb of Newcastle upon Tyne in 1968. Bell committed her first execution when she was just 10 years old. In both instances, Bell informed her victim he had a sore throat, which she would massage before proceeding to strangle him. Bell was convicted of both executions in December 1968 in a trial held at Newcastle Assise when she was 11 years old, and in which her actions were judged to have been committed under diminished responsibility. Her accomplice in at least one of the executions, 13-year-old Norma Joyce Bell, was acquitted of all charges. She remains Britain's youngest female butcher, though not the youngest female executioner, having been diagnosed with a psychopathic personality disorder prior to her trial and convicted of the manslaughter of both boys. Bell was released from custody in 1980 at the age of 23. A lifelong court order granted her anonymity, which has since been extended to protect the identity of her daughter and granddaughter. She has since lived under a series of pseudonyms. At number 3, Derek and Alex King. On November 26, 2001, Derek, accompanied by Alex, beat his father to removal with an aluminum baseball bat. The boys then set fire to the family's home. Ricky Chavez, a family friend, was convicted of being an accessory to the execution after he hid the boys in his trailer home after the patricide and washed the blood from their clothes. Terry King was 40 years old at the time of his passing. The boys claimed that they committed the execution to end mental abuse, including being stared down and spanked. They would change their testimony several times, first claiming that they had ended their father on their own, then that Chavez had convinced them to end Terry, and finally that Chavez had executed Terry King and convinced them to take the fall.
Older brother Derek is now 14. Alex, just a year younger, turned 13 last month. Despite their youth, the boys will be tried as adults for their father's.
Alex also testified that he had been having a relationship with Chavez. In an unconventional move, the prosecution tried both Chavez and the King brothers for the same crime. Chavez was acquitted, and while a second-degree execution conviction was obtained for the King brothers on September 6, 2002, the judge threw the conviction out because he believed the boys' right to due process was violated. The prosecution and defense resolved the case in mediation, avoiding a new trial. Both brothers pleaded guilty to third-degree slaughter in November 2002. Number 2. Ain't That Nathaniel B? On May 26, 2000, the last day of the 1999 to 2000 school year, Brazil, a 7th grade student, shot and ended Barry Grinnell, an English teacher at Lake Worth Middle School in Lake Worth, Florida. After being sent home from school earlier that day for throwing a water balloon, Brazil had returned home, retrieved a .25 caliber handgun, and shot Grinnell. Brazil was tried as an adult and convicted of second-degree slaughter for the ending of Grinnell and aggravated assault for pointing the gun at another teacher. The jury decided not to convict Brazil of first-degree execution, which requires premeditation and carries a mandatory life sentence in Florida. However, juveniles convicted of first-degree execution in Florida are given a review by a judge after 25 years. Brazil was sentenced to 28 years in state prison, followed by 7 years of probation. At number 1, Pedro Rodrigues Filho. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, also known as Padrino Matador, is a Brazilian convicted serial/spree butcher known for pursuing and ending exclusively criminals as a teenager. Between the ages of 14 and 19, in particular, an entire gang in response to the slaughter of his pregnant girlfriend. Officially sentenced for 71 executions, but claiming to have ended over 100 substance dealers, assaulters, and butchers, he served 34 years in prison before his release in 2007. In 2011, Rodriguez was imprisoned again on charges of inciting riot and deprivation of liberty, while initially imprisoned and sentenced to a further 8 years of prison before being released again in 2018 after 7 years on good behavior. His victims included 47 prisoners whom he ended inside the prison in which he was imprisoned. Following Rodriguez's initial planned 2003 release, author Jeff Lindsay began publishing a novel series about a fictional American serial executioner of butchers inspired by Rodriguez, named Dexter Morgan.
You are decent and good.
I'm not.
The series' success, along with that of its 2006 television adaptation and 2022 revival, led to widespread retrospective media attention being brought to Rodriguez, with him becoming internationally known, alternatively both as the Brazilian Dexter and the South American Punisher. Number 10, John Dillinger. John Dillinger, one of the most notorious criminals in American history, was often glorified by the American media for his daring bank heists and thrilling prison escapes. He operated in the 20s and 30s during the Great Depression era, and was idolized by many as the modern-day Robin Hood, because he stole from those same institutions that were capitalizing on the American people's misfortunes. Dillinger's career as a criminal included over 11 bank robberies throughout the Midwest, in which he stole in excess of $300,000, and 3 separate jailbreaks. The mystique surrounding Dillinger's exploits was so captivating that people often forgot or turned a blind eye to the fact that he was responsible for at least 10 slaughters, including that of a sheriff, the passings of several innocent bystanders, and that he left a trail of carnage in his wake. Dillinger's activities, however, did not go unnoticed by Chief Investigator Melvin Purvis of the FBI, who is assigned the task of bringing Dillinger and his gang to justice. When J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI named Dillinger the first public enemy #1 on his 31st birthday in 1934, his fame took on a new meaning, and his name and face became recognizable in every household throughout the Midwest and the rest of the country. There was even a $10,000 reward for his capture. Now a public figure, Dillinger turned to plastic surgery to alter his identity and evade Purvis and the rest of the law enforcement community. In those days, plastic surgery was not as common as it is today, and the medical procedures were primitive, dangerous, time-consuming, and very painful. Dillinger underwent several bouts of plastic surgery, some more successful than others, but in the end he only managed to slightly alter his appearance. After one round of plastic surgery, from which he was extremely disappointed to find that he still looked the same, one of the doctors suggested that he remove his fingerprints as a way to escape being detected. Dillinger liked this idea and elected to undergo the painful process of obliterating his fingerprints. Number 9, Freddie Thompson. According to the New York Times, Freddie Thompson, 35, switched places with another prisoner during an arraignment. The other prisoner was facing a less serious charge of a leafy substance possession, and consequently, Thompson was mistakenly released. Thompson, who was caught for attempted execution and served prison time after pleading guilty to a lesser count including robbery charges, managed to fool authorities by making the identity change. It is unclear how exactly he was able to pose as the other prisoner during his arraignment in a Staten Island courtroom. The mistake points to a series of recent problems by the area's law enforcement agencies. In February, a prisoner posed as a different defendant at an arraignment on a lesser charge. That fugitive, Michael Bautista, 22, is still at large. Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly has rejected the idea that the escaped prisoner exploited a possible loophole. There are ways to verify a prisoner's identity, including checking pictures, he said, but apparently that may not have been done appropriately. Each year, about 400,000 arrests are made and prisoners are processed. The judge released Thompson on his own recognizance. Thompson walked out of court scot-free. It wasn't until several hours later, when the prisoner who Thompson impersonated asked why his name hadn't been called, that authorities realized a mistake had occurred. Number 8, Bela Kiss. Bela Kiss was a Hungarian serial executioner who cops believe ended 24 people. Kiss was nicknamed the Hungarian Pickler because he preserved his victims' bodies in large barrels. Born in Hungary in 1877, he had a rough childhood. In 1912, only a year after marrying his much younger wife, he discovered she was having an affair. Soon after, she and her lover would disappear. Although Kiss claimed that they had left together for a better life in America, the truth was that he ended both of them, becoming Kiss's first victims. This was the start of his execution spree, but for the rest of his victims, he lured women in. Through personal ads in the local Budapest newspaper, he placed ads under the name of Hoffman, claiming to be a lonely widower looking for marriage. He connected with women who were generally well off and whose families were not living nearby. His good looks and personable charm helped to attract them. He was even able to have some of the women sign over their wealth and give him money. Number 7, Frank Morris. In 1960, Frank Morris was sentenced to serve a prison term at Alcatraz. You know the place. The infamous penitentiary was built in 1934 on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Isolated in the water more than a mile from San Francisco, it was designed as an inescapable jail. But when brothers Clarence and John Anglin got to Alcatraz in 1961 and befriended Morris, the trio decided to put the island's reputation to the test. The 3 men stuffed plaster dummies in their cell beds in the middle of the night. With roving guards believing the men were asleep, they quietly escaped through carefully cut holes in their cells. Once outside, they fashioned a makeshift raft out of raincoats and set sail into the bay in the middle of the night. They were never seen again. Initially, prison guards assumed the 3 men had been eaten by sharks. That is still a distinct possibility, but ocean currents would have undoubtedly brought body parts up to shore. Instead, no trace of the men's remains, clothes, or raft has ever been found. Because of that, authorities aren't actually certain whether they successfully escaped or not. If they did escape, however, you bet that they changed their names and their identities. Number 6. Between the spring of 1968 and the fall of 1969, 3 women were terminated in Glasgow, Scotland. Patricia Docker was strangled to passing in February 1968. Her crime went unpunished. A year later, Jemima McDonald was strangled in a nearby neighborhood. 2 months after that, Helen Puddock was also brutally ended in Glasgow. By then, cops started to realize similarities in all 3 slaughters. DNA testing wasn't the norm back then, but police picked up on patterns of how the girls were ended and where they were found. Cops also began to hone in on a description of the butcher, a redhead between the ages of 25 and 35 who's around 6 feet 1.8 meters tall. Upon distributing a sketch to the media, cops labeled the butcher Bible John. It came from Puddock's passing. She and her sister had met 2 men during a night out on the town. Both men were named John. Puddock's date for the evening had an infatuation with quoting the Bible. Throughout the night, he delivered impassioned sermons from the book of Moses. The women jokingly called him Bible John. The name kinda stuck. Number 5. Frank Matthews. Frank Matthews was a notorious substance kingpin in the early 1970s. The New York City native was one of the largest suppliers of substances in the United States. His operations stretched from New York to Miami. Police believed Matthews cleared more than $20 million from his substance empire. He had a network of over 200 dealers working for him, all selling substances he bought from Colombian sources. His operation was so successful that it destroyed the profits of the rest of New York City's substance dealers. This led to tensions between Matthews and other dealers. In 1972, 2 of his associates were ended in a drive-by shooting. Matthews himself narrowly avoided being stopped when an explosive was placed under his car. In 1973, after an arrest, Matthews jumped bail and disappeared. Some believe he was ended by rivals, others say he went into hiding to avoid the lifelong prison sentence that surely would have followed. If he did go into hiding, then we know he changed his identity. That's just the smart thing to do. Number 4. The Freeway Phantom. The Freeway Phantom was a self-given moniker for a Washington, D.C. serial butcher who has never been identified. The butcher was active around America's capital in the early 1970s. In total, he ended 6 young women over a 17-month period. Like the Zodiac butcher before him, the Freeway Phantom sent creepy messages to the police. After executing 18-year-old Brenda Denise Woodard in November 1971, police found a note in one of her pockets. This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. Freeway Phantom. The Phantom name stuck as police found more bodies near highways and other main thoroughfares around Washington. Police worked leads in the 6 passings, including one long look at 2 ex-cops who were convicted of a separate execution. However, they failed to make any headway in finding the butcher. In 1974, the FBI stepped in and added to the list of suspects. The Freeway Phantom appeared to leave as quickly as he arrived. No more passings were linked to his pattern after that awful 17-month period early in the decade. And soon, the case went cold. The investigation is still active in DC to this day, though cops have been criticized for shoddy evidence keeping and a lack of progress on the awful case. Number 3. Victor Garena. Victor Garena was an employee of a Wells Fargo armored car in West Hartford, Connecticut in 1983. That summer, he was recruited by the militant group Los Macheteros to help with a bank heist. The activist group wanted independence for Puerto Rico. Their clandestine run had previously targeted American government officials. Now they were seeking money to fund their operations. Garena's knowledge of the armored car depot made him a natural recruit for Los Maqueteros leader Juan Enrique Segarra Palmer. When Garena led the heist on September 12, 1983, it all fell into place. The Wells Fargo employee tied up 2 of his co-workers and injected them with sedatives to make them fall asleep. He then loaded more than $7 million cash into a rental car and drove off. At the time, it was the largest cash heist in American history. Neither Garena nor the money was ever seen again. Segarra Palmer wasn't so lucky. In 1985, the FBI tracked down Segarra Palmer and 8 of his Los Maqueteros peers in Puerto Rico. They were extradited to Connecticut and convicted on a variety of charges relating to the bank heist and other events. The ringleader was sentenced to 55 years in prison and served about 2 decades before being freed in 2004. Garena has likely fared far better though. He was never found. Number 2. John Ruffo. John Ruffo is one of the rare escaped fugitives not wanted for a violent crime. The businessman had a lengthy career scamming and defrauding investors to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. His most lucrative scheme, according to authorities, was to pose as an executive of the Philip Morris Tobacco Company and convince banks to grant him fraudulent loans. Cops claim Ruffo went around to banks boasting of a research program called Project Star. He would tell finance officials the project was geared toward developing smoke-free cigarettes for the tobacco giant, and they needed seed money to buy computers for the supposed research. It was all a ruse though. Banks would grant loans to Ruffo's company, CCS Inc., and he would simply vanish with the cash. For a while he got away with the scheme and eventually pocketed some $350 million in phony investments. Number 1. Amado Carrillo. In the 1980s and 1990s, Amado Carrillo Fuentes was one of the most successful substance smugglers in North America. The Mexican man created an empire for the Juarez cartel. He smuggled more substances from Colombia to the United States than anyone else in the world. Cops knew him as the Lord of the Skies, for the fleet of private planes he used to fly massive quantities of substances all over the world. However, it all ended in the most unlikely way. Fuentes passed away in 1997 during plastic surgery. The substance kingpin had been trying to change his appearance to avoid being captured by DEA agents. Unfortunately, a surgical mishap left him passed on the operating table. With it, his substance empire came crashing down. For police, Fuentes' passing was bittersweet. The man they'd spent so much years chasing was removed and gone. He never faced justice over his substance empire though. By going to his grave prematurely, Fuentes forever avoided the wrath of the law.